Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Sedro-Woolley City Council. Please rise for our flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to add another item to the agenda under new business. It's a new item. It's interim zoning control ordinance. And so we'll be discussing that and probably maybe some action. So we will go to the consent calendar. Council knows the drill. If something you would like to discuss further, we'll take it off. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. A through F.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar A through F.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Councilmember Galbraith and a second by Councilmember Wagoner to approve the consent calendar A through F. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Passed unanimous. Okay, we are public comment. This is something that's not on the agenda. Please state your name and address for the record. And don't come rushing up all at once. Phil or Tony? No? Sure. Okay, we will be closing public comment. We have no public hearings, no unfinished business, so we will go to item 5, and this is available property tax refund levy, and this would probably be Patsy.
In the past few years, there's been several instances of properties being removed from the tax rolls, and the Association of County Treasurers brought a proposal before the legislature that in cases where the taxing entity had already set their budget, set their tax levy, and then items were removed from the tax rolls, that they be allowed to apply for a refund levy. Basically, it would make the entity whole. In 2014, the full amount of taxes levied by the City Council was not collected due to refunds and abatements in the tax rolls. So now, these taxes that were not collected in 2013, the council has an opportunity to collect them in 2016 if they so choose. These refund levies are outside of the 1% or the maximum property tax calculation. They're on top of that amount for a one-time refund. So the Skagit Valley Hospital is the owner of the properties which were removed from the tax rolls. And the city had to refund taxes that were paid in 2011 through the first half of 2014, and then the second half of 2014 taxes were not collected or paid by the hospital. The total taxes that the city was shorted, if you will, came to $48,710. Part of that was for the bond on the public safety building, and part of that was general taxes. Then later, through an interlocal agreement, the hospital paid the city $32,668 for fire EMS services. Then this week, or last week, excuse me, the city received the documents on page 31 and 32 of your council packet, wanting to know if the city wanted to assess these refund levies. So it's certainly not my decision, it's the council's decision. So I'm requesting that you give direction by motion if you want to request the full levy, a partial amount of the levy, or not request any refund levy at all. So if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. It's kind of a new area in property tax regulations.
Back to the city?
And it's the first levy of request of any significance that has come our way. Last year there was a $100 one which we did pass on.
And this is to receive money back to the city?
Mm-hmm.
Is it refunded back to the taxpayers or to the city? Okay.
No. The city council would assess the levy on the remaining parcels which are subject to property tax. So you and I and the other citizens would pay that.
It's virtually raising the taxes on everybody else to cover the few people that aren't paying.
I'm going to remain true. I can't vote for a property tax. I never have, and I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah, it's a de facto after
Doesn't make
the
sense.
fact property tax increase.
That's wrong. I don't like it.
So I guess I'm just confused. Is it money we have to pay anyway? So this would come out of the general fund back to the county?
The way to think of it is if you have 10 taxpayers and the city levies a $100 tax that year, then and everybody's got equal valuations, everyone pays $10. But midway through the year, one of them says, hey, I'm now a nonprofit. I don't have to pay. And the Department of Revenue authorizes them to get a refund. So the city levied a $100 tax that year but only collected $90. Now, had that person exempted themselves before the year had started and the city levied a $100 tax, then the 9 people would have paid more, $11 instead of 10. But because it happened after the cycle, the city is just short $10. So what this does is says in the following year, when you levy $100, everyone will pay $11, but you could actually levy $110 to make up for what you didn't get the prior year, and therefore everyone pays $12.
Except for the one entity.
That entity's forever gone. Whether they're a public hospital, a school district, a library, somebody who's a senior on a low-income senior, the list has gotten to be very lengthy of those who do not pay. And every time one of those folks drops off the rolls, it doesn't change how much the city collects, it changes how much the rest of us pay. That's something I think that's confusing for a lot of people, but that's what the assessor's office does. You guys don't levy a tax rate. You levy a dollar amount. The assessor's office then slices that pie of pain and suffering out to the community. So, and that's exactly this case, Brett. So the money that we're talking about is money that we did not get. And
Go after it.
And I'll just add the mayor's balanced budget, which you'll get at the next work session, assumes that you are not going to levy this excess levy.
Do you need a motion either way?
If you don't want to take action,
Can we just do nothing?
You can do nothing, and that works.
You see, moving right along.
Moving right along.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we take zero of the refunded amount, that we don't take it. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Well, we don't have to vote on this.
But we don't have to.
Well, you made a motion.
Motion's motion.
Motion by Councilmember Wagoner and a second by Councilmember Sandstrom that we take zero in the refund levy. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, there you go. Direction. Now we'll go to item 6, property tax levy ordinances, the first reading. This would be probably as fast as you can, Doug. Yep. How do I know that?
Well, there's actually good news in the property tax ordinance this year. You normally don't hear good news, but 2016, next year, will be the final payment on the bond for the public safety building.
Yeah.
It's a good deal. A few years ago, the council at that time voted to refund the bonds and save the taxpayers a substantial amount of money. The low-income seniors and disabled persons do not pay that bond tax payment. And the amount being requested for 2016 is the same amount that's been requested since 2009.
Those low-income seniors.
I maybe didn't say that right. Low-income seniors and low-income disabled persons that apply through the county. On page 37 of your packet is a sample ordinance. There's 3 sample ordinances attached. This one is if the council wishes to take a 0% increase in property taxes. The property taxes assessed by the city, the general taxes, would remain the same dollar amount for existing properties. Newly constructed properties would pay at the same tax rate as everyone else. So the total property tax would increase by the amount of new construction. On page 39 is the first of 2 ordinances which are needed if the council chose to take a 1% property tax increase. It's a little more complicated than that, in that as the city has over 10,000 population, we don't fall under the 1% rule anymore. We fall under the IPD rule, which the Department of Revenue calculates this amount every year, which then determines what cities over 2,000 or 10,000 can use to increase their property tax rate. This year, it's lower than usual, and it's 0.251%. So if you wanted to increase 1%, you would need to approve that first ordinance for the amount of the IPD, and then the second ordinance on page 41 would need to be passed, which says basically there's a substantial need to increase the taxes by 1% in order to provide the basic services that the citizens require. One other time since the cities reached that population has this occurred. The IPD actually was a negative number. So in 2009, the council could only assess 99% of the prior year's levy. So they passed a second ordinance saying there's a substantial need to keep property taxes at the same dollar amount, that they wanted to have 100% of the year before. That's the only time that this has ever happened to our city. Then, so that's, I'm calling that a group of, those 2 ordinances go together, should you make that choice. Then on page 43, if the council were to choose to pass an ordinance for the maximum amount of property tax available, it would be 3.45%, which includes the amount banked from prior years plus 1% for this next year. That would increase taxes by the amount of $61,975. Those are, 3 choices. You could choose something else in between. 1% increase would result in $17,815 increase in additional property tax. And as Aaron has already mentioned, the property tax formerly paid by the Skagit Valley Hospital Pavilion property will be spread out amongst the rest of the citizens. So this is indeed a first read. If there's any additional scenarios that you would like a sample ordinance provided for your next meeting, please let me know. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And I also do want to note on page 36, the assessor I've asked them to do this for us every year, created the scenario of how do you use banking? How much specifically does our city have banked? And according to the Department of Revenue, no one can unbank what's been previously banked. It stays there until it's taken.
Do you know how old that bank is? Or how many years we've not...
It couldn't at least be 9 years old because the city council has not banked, I think, for either 8 or 9 years now.
2009.
2009.
2009.
I think it was 2009. I don't recall. I think it was back in the 90s sometime, but I can research that.
No, it's not recent.
No, it's not recent.
2009.
And
That's when I think it was.
we are
it was
the
9. 'cause I-
we are the smallest bank in the county. Amount.
Do we?
Oh, yeah, I've checked. Mount Vernon's like 300 grand sitting there waiting for someone to gobble up.
Now, that'd be 300 grand per year, right?
They can raise,
That would be per year.
That's a new base.
Yeah.
they got a base, they can go out and get, yeah, and the county has about 200.
So at your next meeting, there'll be a public hearing on property taxes.
Okay, we're done with the first reading. Item 7.
Marijuana.
And this,
Interim zoning.
marijuana is item 8, and that'll be committee.
We stuck it in.
This is interim zoning control ordinance, and this will be Aaron.
Yeah, so on your table tonight is a proposed ordinance that would impose a moratorium on the processing or accepting of applications, permits, or licensing and establishment for any building or land use activity involving public uses in the mixed commercial zone. The ordinance would also provide for a public hearing, establish an effective date, and provide that the moratorium, unless extended, would sunset automatically within 6 months of the date of adoption. I don't bring this type of ordinance to you very often. I'm trying to remember the last time. I think we may have done an ordinance of this nature with marijuana in the early stages of the development of marijuana regulation. And before that, there was an ordinance that had been enacted before I got here that lived on for quite a while, dealing with the sewer capacity issues. And of course, we worked as hard as we could, as quickly as we could, to get that ordinance lifted on subdivisions. What's going on is we have heard, not from an intergovernmental or government-to-government way, or even from a staff-to-staff way, but from a consultant, that the Central Skagit Rural Partial Library District is considering locating a library within the city's limits, and that they may be interested in a mixed commercially zoned property. And of course, for us, much of our mixed commercial zone falls along the SR20 corridor. And, if you look at available sites, one is attached to the hotel out there, the old Alfie's Pizza location, and you can see in the recitals really addressing what the city's done out there. And over the past few years, literally millions of dollars have been spent to enhance the SR20 corridor. We added center turn lanes. We built out all the street frontage on both sides with sidewalks. We lowered the highway under the trestle, and then the city council went and rezoned the property all along that corridor specifically to mixed commercial as a way to generate tax revenue for the citizens to, really capitalize on the investment that you made on that corridor. So as you see walking through this, one of the concerns is that our zoning code as it currently reads would allow any public use to jump right into into the mixed commercial zone. And public uses neither pay property tax nor generate any retail sales tax. So, that right there is the issue. It's the concern about the incompatibility of the vision of the mixed commercial zone as articulated in the code. And you can see our code says the intent of the mixed commercial zone is to encourage a compatible mix of commercial and residential development with standards intended to present an attractive and welcoming appearance to visitors at the entrance to the city and at selected nodes along major roads. Obviously the objective there is to get more Skagit farmer supplies and things of that nature out on the highway. one of the other concerns that's raised with a public use in the mixed commercial zone specifically is the demand for services. You look at the idea that, there's no payment into property taxes or retail sales tax, yet there's absolutely a demand for police, fire services, for public works in terms of maintaining, snow clearing, sidewalks, all that. So it's a little frustrating, particularly frustrating if the public use itself doesn't actually benefit the citizens of the city. So that's a concern that there may be a mismatch between the public who's being served and the taxpayers who are providing the service to the public who's being served. So this ordinance is really intended just to kind of put a freeze frame out there, just to preserve the status quo. It says, hey, everything stays the same today. Don't bring in a permit, it won't vest. We're going to sit down and figure this out. So it's not a permanent decision, it's a moratorium. The next steps, if you choose to adopt it, will be a public hearing in front of the City Council, and the development of a work plan, the adoption of findings after you've heard from the public, and then our charge under state law is to expeditiously work through the process to come up with proposed permanent zoning that can be put into place looking forward. So there's nothing permanent about the moratorium, and in fact the City Council may look at it, hold a public hearing, and say, nah, this is okay, and then let the moratorium expire. Or you may go ahead and send it to the Planning Commission with a work plan and say, you need to go figure this out, talk to the community, let's make sure that what we're doing in our mixed commercial zone is what we want for our future. And that's really the crux of this. There's let me see here.
Why don't we just make a motion?
I think that's it. The only other point I was going to suggest or make is this is an emergency ordinance, so if the council is interested in adopting it, it requires one more than the majority, so that's unusual. Most of our ordinances only require 4. This requires 5 to be effective, and it becomes effective immediately upon passage and signature by the mayor. So, and the reason for that is that we have a common law doctrine in Washington of vested rights, and so if somebody shows up at the permit counter and brings a complete application, they vest into the law of the day. A moratorium ordinance prevents that from occurring. So if the ordinance was out in public circulation and you had a public notice and a big public hearing in advance, that would allow somebody who may want to develop something that would be different from status quo to run in, beat the ordinance, get their permit on the counter invested, and then it would defeat the moratorium ordinance. So that's really the intent of that process. And the last piece is the public hearing is currently in this ordinance will be scheduled for December 9th. It could happen sooner. I selected that date only because the next council meeting's a little too early. The second council meeting in November is right at Thanksgiving, and so December 9th seemed to be the most likely to actually open the forum up for public comment on it.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 1825-15, an interim ordinance to the City of Sedro-Woolley adopting a moratorium on the processes or accepting applications within our mixed commercial zone.
Second. Excuse me, Mayor. 2 of the ordinances numbers were used in the consent, so it'd be 1827-15.
Thank you. Excuse me, 1827-15.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Councilmember Sandstrom, a second by Councilmember Cornegay to approve ordinance number 1827-15, and I'm just going to read the verbatim, an interim ordinance of the City of Sedro-Woolley, Washington, adopting a moratorium on the processing or accepting of applications, permits, or licensing and establishment for any building or land use activity involving public use in a mixed commercial zone, providing for a public hearing, establishing an effective date, and providing that the moratorium, unless extended, will sunset within 6 months of the date of adoption. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I didn't see this. Against? It passes unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we will go to committee reports and reports from officers. Mr. Harris, Officer Harris.
So, a couple notes from the chief here. It looks like what we're doing up at the Northern State campus is Job Corps. We went up there and met with them and coordinating some active shooter type training that we're going to do at the Job Corps folks, as well as the PCM building. So we're working that through as well as with the schools. So we work with the high school and middle schools to work on some training for active shooter stuff. Officer McCombs and Carroll were released off FTO, so they're out on their own as of Monday this last week. So we have 2 more bodies on the street all by themselves. So that's a good thing. The radio reprogramming, we got the new tower up at the cell site. That started yesterday, programming the new radios for those. A couple nice things with the radios on whenever we key up now, either our portable radios or in our cars, it's going to send to dispatch and every other officer in Sedro-Woolley which unit number keyed up. So, for example, if I key my mic, and even if I can't talk, it's going to know that George 3 keyed up. So that's a good safety thing for us. And our portables are going to have a panic button, basically, so if we hit that, it's going to send everybody, hey, we need help. Which will be kind of helpful as well.
Is there any way they could know your location, like the sheriffs do?
Not yet. As far as our vehicles, they know our location. We have GPS in the vehicles, but the radios don't have that yet. That's in the next generation, and a lot more money, but it's in the pipe work sometime down the future.
See, the next generation radio is about $2,500 a unit. Our current radios are about $1,000. And that next generation radio, in addition to having the integrated GPS, so it would give you PTT ID plus geolocation, it also offers what they call P25 compatibility. So it's just a stronger radio. It's more resilient. It's intrinsically safe. It's got a few other features of that nature. And then the big feature that we actually want, the other stuff we could probably live without, but it has the ability to run encrypted. So our repeater is the first one in the county that can run encrypted. And our radios are now the first law radios in the county that have PTT ID. So Fire's done that. We're the first law agency with PTT ID. But if we do get these new radios, then our officers would have the ability to switch to an encrypted mode, which would
So people can't hear you.
would defeat scanners. And so there are situations where they're literally chasing a suspect, and the guy could have an earbud in his ear, and he has about a 5-second delay.
Yeah.
But he's hearing in with 5-second delay, essentially real time. George 3, just run around the corner of the building, you head him off, and then the guy's going, oh, I go this way instead. So there are scenarios like that, or you can imagine an active shooter scenario, or a planned, breach of a house, a drug house, or something of that nature, where there really is no advantage to putting what you're doing out over the public airwaves. So that's something we want to do, and we'll be bringing to you a strategy for how to fund that as soon as we're able to figure that out.
And that was all I had.
Jason, does that PTD ID, is that position, time, date identification? What is that?
Push to talk.
Push to talk?
PTT ID. Push to talk identification. So the PTT is just
Pushing the button.
the button.
That's government lingo.
Okay, Chief Klinger.
Just wanted to let the council know the Volunteer Association held their annual fundraiser that they do for the Phoenix Burn Foundation this past weekend, and they raised about $14,000. So they'll be able to send off after expenses somewhere between 11 and 10, hopefully the 11 mark. But this is their fundraiser that they do annually for them. It's for and their main camp is out on Samish Island, so it's really a fun fundraiser that the guys do. And also we'll be starting November 1st. We'll have a new volunteer lieutenant coming on board for his training, so we're excited about that. David Williams, I don't know if some of you may know Dave, but he'll be starting his training rotation through January, and then we'll put him on his own starting at the end of January. So that's it, Mayor.
Well, it's my pleasure to announce that the building department has hired a building inspector and plans examiner full-time. We've hired a Tony Niskanen. He's extremely qualified, and we're looking forward to have him work with us. We feel like we got lucky to find somebody that is as qualified as he is, and just super happy. The planning department, planning commission still working on urban growth area change possibilities. They had a public hearing on the 20th of October, and we're not able to get through. That hearing went very late, so they weren't able to complete any proposals. So they're having a special meeting on November 3rd to continue to go over mapping issues, as well as on that day there's going to be a presentation from the Center for the Center for Innovation and Technology in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, we dropped the Pacific Northwest.
In Sedro-Woolley. We're calling it the Center, I guess. They're going to be given a presentation about what a plan of action is, and just giving the Planning Commission an idea of what the process is for adopting the sub-area plan for the Center of Innovation and Technology. And then following up with more work on the urban growth area stuff. Yesterday, related to the UGA changes, the county held a docketing hearing about whether or not they should even put it on their work schedule in 2015 or in 16 for reviewing changes to the Sedro-Woolley urban growth area, as well as numerous other docket requests that they had. I think they had somewhere in the range of 25 docket changes to the comp plan and policies. We suspect that they're going to have no problem adopting it. The commissioners will be making a decision in November. I think it's the 24th. But the hearing, the public hearing part of it is, I think, ending tomorrow. And that's all I've got.
Great. Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. You have my report, which there's quite a few things going on, and you can look at that at your leisure. A couple of things I'd like to point out. We're continuing with the design on the Jameson Arterial project. I've noted in the memo there that I've approved under the Director's authority 2 supplemental agreements for the Lochner contract. Those have happened over the last couple of months. They're relatively minor. They allowed for some additional topographic surveying that wasn't in their original contract, and also for the additional traffic analysis we did that came out of the public meeting we had on the project some time back. I just wanted you to be aware of those. David Lee has started work on the design for the Cascade Trail projects 1A and 1B. We did receive federal funds authority to start the design on 1B, and we are going to design those together. We only have design phase funds for 1B. We have design and construction for 1A. In association with that, I've got a request for statements of qualifications out that closes on the 12th for consultants to support David's design work. It would be the environmental, the geotechnical, and the surveying. And there's a little bit of surveying yet to do. Most of it was already finished. Under federal rules, we have to go through a pretty stringent process, and so we're doing that with under our consultant selection guidelines. We also have published for statements of qualifications for consultants to design the Fruitdale Road Arterial Improvement Project. That's the project that would rebuild Fruitdale from roughly Portobello to the county, city-county limits. It would also correct the closed section, slide area. David and I were talking about that today, and we're actually at the 3-year anniversary of the closure. Time passes quickly. But anyway, we're optimistic we can get a good consultant. We do have quite a bit of interest. We'll be closing those series on the 5th, and there's been a consultant selection team set up by the mayor that will be reviewing those, and we'll select a good qualified engineer to support that or to handle that work for us. As you know, there's a partnership of the city, the county, and the port. And each has agreed to contribute a certain amount to the project, $60,000 per agency, and we're also looking for an additional contribution from the developer there to fully round out that design work, which is going to be about $300,000, our best estimate right now. So that's moving ahead. Also, one of the things that has to happen in step with that is getting a federal functional classification for the route. It already is an urban major collector from Highway 20 to Portobello. It's just a rural city or county road from there up, and it does need to be classified under the federal system in order to obtain most of the funding sources that we're looking for. So that's being done under the TSI agreement that the partnership has for doing the EIS, and they should be ready to submit that in the next few days. Also, related to the Cascade Trail project, the county announced a call for grants under the Economic Development Program. It's been kind of on hold the last couple of years. You might recall we've frequently taken advantage of that. We had $500,000 for the Patrick Road Roundabout project. We had $500,000 for the Fruitdale McGargle project in the past. We're looking for some funds under the present call to support our shortfall on the Phase 1A project. And as you probably recall from my previous reports on that, we're short about $200,000 of fully funding the storm drainage part of that. So we're making an economic development nexus on having that storm drain done. It does limit development of the vacant properties up in that area, such as the surplus right-of-way that one of these days the city will own when DOD gets done reviewing the deeds and stuff. And there's 3.6 acres that's available that could be segregated and sold for development right at the corner of West Ferry and Highway 20. There's some acreage still undeveloped on the Crossroads Shopping Center, and also the area that's currently residential south of Cook Road between West Ferry and Highway 20 is ripe for redevelopment as a commercial use and is zoned that way. So we're anxious to submit that application, and I would request Council's authorization for the mayor to submit that grant application. It's due on Friday. I'm sorry that I wasn't here earlier to talk about it. Maybe Aaron mentioned it last time, but I would request your action on that.
So the grant request will be for $222,000. The project's about a $575,000 project. So the grant maximum request is $500,000. There's $2.5 million available in this round, and it's the first round we've had in 3 or 4 years. So
you want a request to apply for the grant for the 9 cents?
Yeah, motion to allow the mayor to sign the grant application to Skagit County for the Phase 1A project.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to authorize you to sign the grant application for
Phase 1A.
Phase 1A.
Yes, 1-8.
That works.
1-8.
Okay, we got a second. We got a motion by Councilmember Sandstrom, second by Councilmember Lemley to authorize the mayor to sign a grant application for Phase 1A. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Against? Okay. How much is that exactly for?
$220,000.
What that does is, in the budgeting we've been doing, we've been identifying, we have about $146,000 in our stormwater reserve that we had earmarked for that project and have actually budgeted for that. This will allow us to retain our reserve funds for other uses, and we certainly do have other uses, and to fully fund that project. We would have been short, even with our reserves, $76,000, so this would fully fund it if the county agrees with our application on this. And we think it's a reasonable ask. It's the only one we have with this particular round. We'll be looking for $500,000 from the next available call for this, which we understand will be this fall to in the spring of 16, which will support the Fruitvale Road Arterial project. So we'll be having a bigger ask next time. One other thing I wanted to make you aware of, we just completed our annual inspection of all of the culverts and bridges on Brickyard Creek, and we found that one of the bridges needs some immediate attention. The bridge at Klinger Street was built when that development was built back in the early 2000s. The original design called for standard concrete abutments and then a bridge built on that. It's basically a concrete girder bridge. There was an approved change on that where my predecessor or whoever was involved at the time approved building that as a concrete slab on grade on top of riprap fill. Bad idea. That's a creek that flows very rapidly in the storm events, and what's happened over the years is it has eroded the riprap away on one of the abutments to the point now where it's actually undermined. It's a 4-foot wide slab. It's undermined up to 18 inches of that, getting to the point where I'm concerned about the integrity of the bridge. So we are going to be making an application to Fish and Wildlife for a quick action hydraulic project approval and going in there next week to restore the riprap underneath of the bridge back to its original slopes. This will be kind of an emergency repair just to make sure we can get through the winter without any issues. And then sometime in the spring we'll go in and after that, we're actually in the summer when the creek's dry again, we'll go in and actually install some gunite to armor that and protect that from happening again. So you'll see some activity down there, and that's what that's all about, and we'll get that done in the next week or so. Just wanted you to be aware of that. I've requested use of the Sedro-Woolley subflood zone flood funds for this. We're doing it with our own forces, so our cost should be limited to, we'll have to rent a low clearance excavator with a thumb on it to place the rocks, and then if we have to buy some riprap, there'll be some expenses there. I don't expect it to be much more than $5,000 this year. There'll be something else next year. So that's coming up. That's all I had.
Hunting season's almost over?
Hunting season's almost over. I'm starting to gradually get my crew back. I haven't had much of a crew for about 3 weeks. They've been pretty successful, so most of them should be pretty happy to go back
I've
to work
seen the pictures and
pay for all of that hunting they've done. So, yeah.
A lot of heads.
On Brickyard Creek on Klinger Street?
Hey, Aaron?
So on page 45 of your packet, I put a copy of RCW 6950-331 in there, and if you actually flip a couple pages into page 48, under 8A and B, you see some new authority for cities. So a couple things going on here. One is this law passed the legislature and became effective. It allows cities to decrease the size of the buffer around marijuana establishments. So the prior law was a 1,000-foot buffer around, let's see, It was playgrounds, 1,000-foot buffer for elementary schools, secondary schools, playgrounds, recreation centers, child care centers, public parks, public transit centers, libraries, game arcades, as long as they're restricted to persons who are younger, or not restricted to people who are younger than 21. The new law says that the 1,000-foot buffer, new law says you can drop that down to 100 feet with the exception of elementary schools, secondary schools, and playgrounds. So I'm not bringing you a recommendation, I'm just merely letting you know that should you want, you can reduce the buffer from 1,000 feet down to a minimum of 100 feet for recreation centers, child care centers, public parks, transit centers, libraries, etc. And then the second piece of this puzzle is the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Control Board eliminated the allocation process. So we had been allocated a maximum of one marijuana retailer. They've said, however many you want is fine. So if you do nothing, you have the potential of having however many they approve that fit within your citing requirements. And we currently have one, and at the time I know the council had said, well, we've got one, so once it's cited, we kind of don't need to worry about this. The Liquor and Cannabis Board changed the game on you there, and you could have the potential of more, and in fact we did have one apply here, a week or two ago, John? And the city indicated that the location they selected was within 1,000 feet of protected buffer areas, public park in that case. But you may see more retailers. So,
but our city laws or ordinances still apply the 1,000 feet.
1,000 foot.
The state may say you can have as many as you want, but our ordinance says 1,000 feet. Until we change it, that's what it is.
Exactly right. Yeah. So you'd have to take.
We can still have more than one if they comply with the 1,000 feet rule.
That's right.
Or if we change that.
Yeah. So you would have, the council would have to take affirmative action to decrease the buffer. That wasn't automatic. What was automatic was the increase from one retailer to more than one.
Is it on a case-by-case basis? Like, let's say we have one that wants to go in such and such a place, and they seem okay, and we want to, negate a park. Can we lower the fee for that, or does it lower the park for all applications?
Yeah, it'd be for all.
Okay.
Yeah, so this law, like generally all of them, applies to all within a class.
Okay. So if we say 150 feet from a park,
it would be all of our parks.
They have to fit that. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, if City Council wants to do something with that, let me know. We are continuing to move forward with the Northern State Project, and I think we may know more here in November to be able to report back to you. You will for sure have items on your agenda in December. This is kind of the last quiet meeting before things get pretty exciting. Just looking forward over the next 6 meetings. Next week, or you'll get the mayor's balanced budget. Following meeting, you'll get the first readings on all the ordinances that go into that, the rate setting ordinances, the tax ordinances, second reading property tax, public hearings. So that's kind of your November. We've got Katie Isaacson scheduled to come and finish the conversation about sewer billing, and her conversation will be limited to the commercial strength issue. So my sense was that the council completed its discussion of volume-based billing for residences. So the last piece of that puzzle was strength-based billing for commercial industrial customers. So we'll have that conversation for you. And then we roll right into December, which is going to be heavy with planning, dealing with the planned action ordinance and some of the other things that are working through the Planning Commission. So that'll be exciting. We're getting closer on the council packet reading devices. I've been using it now for a while. I'm quite happy. You can take notes on it. So the tentative plan is to actually get these ordered in November, programmed and set up, and then for everyone who's either wasn't on the ballot or was elected or re-elected, we'll get you those in December, and we'll run 1 month where we've got both paper packets and electronic packets. so that as we transition into January, we would be fully electric at that point, or digital. These will have, in addition to your council packet, which you'll just download, you'll have your city email account on here, which is helpful for us from a public record standpoint. Then the last thing I was going to mention, I'll bring it up again, but the AWC newly elected officials workshop, which some of you attended when you were first elected. Most recently, it's been held in Linwood, I think. I know I went with Brett here maybe 6 years ago, I guess. That will be hosted here at Sedro-Woolley City Hall on December 5th. So if anyone's interested in that refresher type course, it's the same format as it's been for 20 plus years. It's limited to 60 participants, but it's very conveniently located in Sedro-Woolley. In fact, we're the only host city really on the northwest corner. So if you're in the Seattle area on north, I would expect we'll have the full house of 60 newly elected officials here that day. So it'll be kind of fun. So if any of you are interested in coming, let me know so I can get you registered. And that's all I've got.
Patsy?
Due to the Veterans Day holiday, your next meeting will be Thursday, November 12th. So I thought I'd mention that so you could get it on your calendar.
Oh, yeah. Good catch.
That's what, 2016, 2017?
2015.
2015?
He's an interesting guy, but we had I don't know if anyone knows Noah Brosall, but he passed away just yesterday. And I think the history of the city is pretty interesting, and he did a good job chronicling it. You can find his information on Skagit River Journal. It's pretty cool.
We all die sooner or later.
Service is pending.
Okay.
Things are working on that. If I look around the room, I'm going to say for those of you with grandchildren, I think most of us don't have young enough anymore, the Halloween parade is Saturday,
4 p.m.
4 o'clock. Meet down there at the corner of Talcott and Metcalf. Walk through the parade, turn around, and hit all the stores with the little monsters.
Yeah,
that's a fun one to watch.
Yeah.
Hubert?
I was... There's a company over on State Street called Gen X, and they had a problem with a person coming in, and they have a camera, and they took a picture of him. I was wondering if we could get a police person to go over there and look at that picture. He had said something about visiting children and some other things that were pretty sketchy. And from my perspective, I would like the police to see his face.
Do you know, did they call 911?
They did, and they talked to someone, and no one came over there. I think it would be appropriate to get somebody to go over there and get a face with a name, because he said he was coming back. So
Do you know when that happened?
you'd have to ask them. No, I don't. That's all.
Keith?
The football game has been rescheduled from Friday to Thursday. It's a home game. We're in the playoffs, so now we're playing for seeding in the playoffs. Be important.
That's tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, right. 7 o'clock. So
7 o'clock?
Great. Reschedule.
That's it?
that's it.
I have nothing today.
Jermaine?
I'm disappointed. I took Friday off to go to that game, and I have to work tomorrow night. Oh, well, that's been happening the whole season. I just wanted to remind everyone to vote, because ballots are due November 3rd. I think in the drop box by 8 o'clock or postmarked by that day. So please make sure you vote.
Nothing.
Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Thank you for coming.